Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Felix, and I'm very excited to talk about how to make Git work with Excel files. We launched git-xitrail about 7 months ago, and we've been talking to many users since then that allowed us to identify 4 main challenges when we commit Excel files to our Git repositories. And these 4 challenges are listed in my very first slide. So probably the biggest challenge here is to not be able to use the diff viewer that we are used to from the standard Git system, both on the server side and also on the local client side. Then another issue is big Excel files. So often we see Excel files that are between 20 and 30 megabytes big. And if they are developed actively, which means 1 or 2 commits every day or maybe more, then we may have an issue with the space pretty soon. Then the third issue is obviously merge conflicts. Merge conflicts are probably never really much fun, but for Excel files, we are basically in a special situation. So we have a couple of insights how we can ship around that or how we can deal with those. And then finally, we have the issue that Git has a little bit of a learning curve. It's not always quite easy to understand for people who are not used to Git, maybe business users. And we're going to see how Git clients, different types of Git clients can make that work a little bit easier. So for all of these challenges that I've just gone through, we have usually a couple of solutions that are free and sometimes also open source. And just a few more comments before I get started. I do assume a basic knowledge of Git in this talk. So if that's not true for some of you, then I suggest to search for a Git tutorial after this webinar to bring you up to speed. And if you have any questions during the webinar, then please use the chat either here from the Zoom meeting or just reply to the reminder email that was sent out before. That would be to info@git-xltrail.com. And then if we have time at the end of the meeting, I will try to answer at least a couple of these questions. And finally, yes, we will send around the recording and the slides from this webinar after the end. And having said all that, let's just start with our first challenge, which would be the missing diff viewer on the client side. So this here is, for everybody who has used Git before, is a standard git diff command. So if you're working with text files, with source files for pretty much every language, then Git is able to show you in red what you deleted and in green what you added. Now, if we apply that to Excel workbooks, then this is pretty much all we get. So we know they differ, they changed, but Git doesn't give us any insight into what actually changed. And Git actually does allow you to easily commit Excel files. So like the start is very easy, but then to get any insight, that's the more difficult part. So for this first challenge, we have a couple of solutions here. So first of all, we developed an open source Git extension that is actually able to diff VBA code. And on top of that, it also adds the temp files, the one that start here with a dollar sign. It adds that to the ignore file, so you don't have to set this up manually. We will obviously work on that. It's still very early stage, so currently it's Windows only. It has a limited amount of features, but there is a lot of plans we have to extend that in the future to make configuration of Git towards Excel friendliness as easy as it gets. We have included the link here, so you can get all the information there. You can download the installer there, and then once you have downloaded the installer and executed it on your system, you will have a new command available on your command prompt. So this is git-xitrail. Once you have that, you can then activate the extension either globally down here or then on a per repository basis using the -- local command here. Now, to see how that works, I would like to put in a short demo here. So I'm going to go here into one of my Git repositories where I do have Excel files and where I actually made some changes in my working directory. So when I do this, as you saw on the screenshot, we have basically not a lot of information available. So now at this time, I'm coming here and I'm just going to say git-xitrail install, and I'm going to go for the local mode so that it really just activates it here for that very repository where I'm currently in. So now I can do git diff, and I can instantly see the kind of familiar output that I'm used to seeing when I issue the git diff command and when I deal with text files. So this is really what our git-xitrail Git extension currently does. It takes your Excel workbooks, it reads out the VBA part, and it gives you the familiar red-green highlighting here of lines that you've changed or added or edited. So that's a very simple way how you can instantly get the code inside into the diff inside into your code of your Excel workbooks. Then let me get back to my slides here. So this is what we've just seen. And then we have actually another possibility. So currently, git-xitrail only covers the VBA side of things, but obviously, more often than not, you surely have a lot of content in your workbooks, in the sheets and in the cells itself. And to get an insight into what's happening there, we could use a tool from Microsoft, which is called Spreadsheet Compare. So Spreadsheet Compare is part of like the latest releases of Excel. And it is a standalone desktop app that's kind of a little bit hidden away. So if you have never come across that, it doesn't mean that you don't have it. You probably can look for it. And the chances are, if you have a recent version of Excel, then you will probably find it. What is the tool Spreadsheet Compare is able to compare two Excel files, and that's about it. So to make that tool work with Git, to make it easy to use, we have to change a few settings here and do a little bit of a magic. And what exactly you have to do is described in detail here again on our blog post if you follow that link here. Looking forward, we can probably integrate that setup into git-xitrail so that it's not really manual work that you have to do anymore, and that will make your life also easier. Then let's just again switch back to my live demo so that we can see how this works in practice. So let's switch to my other repository here where I have already followed the steps from the blog post and where I have set up Spreadsheet Compare so that whenever I run git diff, I actually invoke the Spreadsheet Compare program. So let's do that here, and you can see it now starts up Spreadsheet Compare, and you get the two spreadsheets here side by side. You have a selection down here of things that you actually want to see the difference of. So for instance, if I'm not interested in values, if I'm interested in the formulas or the entered values, but not the calculated values, then I can just deactivate that. So you can see here, you do have to do a little bit the jump between the left and the right-hand side, but you can definitely see that I changed my revenues here from 20 to 50%. just as a very simple example. Then down here, we do have a list of changes. So I can actually see that green change that we see here in the cells. I can also see down here in the list. And then I can also go into the changes on the VBA side. I can double click that, and then I'm, well, presented with a little bit of an offending user interface. It looks a bit like the 1990s, but nevertheless it works, it's integrated. So this is also a neat way how you can integrate this tool, Spreadsheet Compare, into the Git workflow. All right, so let's click this away and let's have a quick look into how things can also work when you use, or when you prefer to use a UI tool as opposed to the command line here. So I have here installed the Bitbucket source tree, which is a free GUI tool for managing your Git repositories. And I have the same repository open here, and you can see I have my model spreadsheet here in a unstaged version. So I can also go here and, well, basically right click on it and then click on external diff. And it also works from within this GUI tool so that it starts the spreadsheet compare file, and we are back to the same view that we just invoked before with the git diff command on the command prompt. So that's a very, very neat way of getting a hand on what actually happened in your workbook before you do a git add and a git commit and finally git push to your remote repository. Then let's get back to our slides here. So we have seen how this works. We have gone through the example here with the GUI tool, source tree, again here a screenshot. And this then brings us to the next point. So still the first issue about not being able to view the diffs, but this time we're moving away from the local client side and we're moving on to where we usually deal with GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab or maybe Visual Studio Team Foundation Server or Visual Studio Team Services. So basically we're going to look at the server side of things and how we are presented here, or what tools do we have available on that side of things. So we are basically presented with the very same picture as what we've just seen on the client side. So GitHub and all the other server tools, web UIs, they present us with basically the file name, but whenever we click into the file name, we see nothing else than basically a download button. So again, I mean, Git is very happy to version the Excel files for you, but you would not get any of the benefits that you are used to from a standard Git system. So to solve that, we built the git-xitrail application. And git-xitrail is a server application, and I'm pretty excited to announce that we have just recently launched a free cloud version of git-xitrail. And you can see the URL on the top here. So it's cloud.git-xitrail.com, which is a free platform for public repositories that is able to sync with all of our repositories, whether you're hosting them on GitHub or Bitbucket, and so on and so forth. And instead of looking at the screenshots here, I'm also going to go to basically the page here. So you can see we have already quite a lot of repositories that we sync from different users and different vendors. So basically we have Bitbucket repositories, we have GitHub repositories, and we have also repositories from GitLab. And I'm going to again have a look at the repository that we've just come across a couple of times on the client side. So I have my git-xitrail demo repository here, and This time, what I can do is I can actually click on the file name, and instead of just a download button, I actually get the full insight of what the content of my spreadsheet is. So this view here is really just one file. It's my evaluator model.xlsm. And down here, I see all the content parts. So these, the first ones are the spreadsheets. And then below the spreadsheets, we have the VBA modules or VBA classes or VBA form modules, just any VBA part that you may have in your workbook. First of all, we also do have a little bit of a help here. The red asterisks basically indicates which part of the whole spreadsheet actually has been touched at all during the last commit. And that's pretty helpful because a lot of users that we've seen on our way here, they have really humongous spreadsheets with maybe 50 sheets, and it's difficult to kind of keep the overview and see where the whole a change happened. So now when we go one step further and we click into the sheet, we actually see the content of that sheet. So we do see the formulas here. We can scroll through time, so I can click on the different commits. I can see the status as how it was during this commit. But really what is very, very helpful here, what makes the difference here is that you can do, you can click on show changes again. And this kind of brings us back to the, the familiar view of how you're used to work with GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab. So every commit just indicates me in red what I deleted and in green what I added. And you can also get the kind of summary here. So we have 24 different cells compared to the previous versions. We have 2 entire columns that we deleted. And then we can also take this, this change jumper, and this allows us to jump through all the changes and allows us to also see the changes that may be a bit hidden at first. And the most important thing here is that this system here allows you to introduce a peer review to your changes the same way as you are used to it from code changes in any language that you're just checking into Git. And the fun fact about this workbook is actually that I was downloading it for this demo here from an internet page. So I didn't really know the content of this workbook. And what I actually tried to do is I was trying to reduce, it's a financial model over 5 years. So I just wanted to reduce the time horizon to 4 years. So obviously all I thought I had to do was deleting this column here, the column F. And what I wasn't aware of was that there was actually some hidden columns here that I was missing and where I was introducing some reference errors. So that's kind of the very basic use case of git-xitrail here, to be able to verify your commits and have, well, either yourself or a colleague do a peer review so that whatever you committed is really the thing that you intended to do. Pretty much as you would do with any other piece of code. Now, when we go back here to the content view and scroll down to the sheets here, then we, the VBA module, then you can see, first of all, we are presented with a VBA view that has a correct syntax highlighting. And that's already kind of a much better start than what you get on other platforms that usually don't really have the proper VBA syntax highlighting. Then you do get this view without having to do anything. So you just commit your spreadsheet and git-xitrail syncs with your Git repository and automatically extracts that VBA part. And then you can go back here to see the changes. You can see it inline, you can see it side by side. So this here is really exactly the functionality that you are expecting from a system like Git, but applied to Excel workbooks and the VBA code they carry. Okay, so this was a very, very quick overview of how git-xitrail works. We can also go into the history here. We can click on the commit history, on the commit message, and then we get all the diffs of a spreadsheet of that commit in one go. So I can see here, I modified that sheet, and then below, whenever I may have a couple of VBA changes in different modules, then I will see them all one on top of the other down here. So that's also a very nice view. Then to have you use that platform, at the moment, it is kind of early stage in the sense of a cloud platform. So all you can do for now is really just click on the add button. You take your HTTPS URL from GitHub or from Bitbucket or from GitLab, you paste it, you add the repository, and then in a few minutes later, you will have your repository available here with all the insights. And from here on, it'll just be synced whenever you push something to your Git repository, the git-xitrail will automatically sync it. And depending on the size of your workbook, if it is 30 megabyte, it obviously takes a little bit longer for us to sync it and display the differences. But if it's a standard file, then it basically works very quickly. So you push to GitHub, let's say, and you switch over to git-xitrail, and you will be able to see the differences. All right, so that was the introduction here of our new free cloud offering of git-xitrail. We saw all this, and this brings us to actually our second issue and our second challenge that we face when dealing with Excel files and Git, which is large Excel files and hence large repositories. So to understand how this works, you need to know that Git stores the versions, not just the diffs, and the difference of Git compared to a lot of different to a lot of other version control systems is that Git downloads the whole history of your repository during the initial clone process. So if you do git clone your URL, then you will get all the workbooks in all the versions that have been committed since the beginning of this repository. And obviously, if you have a repository with a few workbooks and each of those have a few megabytes and each of those have a few commits, then you possibly end up in a situation where it takes a long time for the initial cloning. So whenever a new team member, let's say, joins your team, it takes them a long time to get started. And it can also take away a lot of disk space on your local hard disk. And obviously, we always say hard disk is cheap, storage is cheap. But if we look at the example here, so we have a workbook which is somewhere between 25 and 27 megabyte, which is not too uncommon when we look at the use cases that we've seen over the last couple of months. And if you commit that just like one time every business day, then we end up having 7 gigabyte of repository data at the end of the year. And 7 gigabyte is, well, it's quite something. It takes certainly quite some time to do an initial cloning. And depending on how big your hard disk is, you will actually notice it. So since this is such a common problem, it's not only the problem for Excel files, but maybe also for pictures like artwork, then GitHub and Bitbucket, they were actually recognizing this issue, and they came up as a solution to that issue with a Git extension similar to what we did, git-xitrail. They came up with another open source and free Git extension, which is called Git LFS. And LFS, as you can see here, stands for Large File Storage. And what the extension does is actually it downloads the files lazily. So it does not download all versions of all files that were at any point in time committed during the cloning process, but it only downloads the current file of interest. So basically your head version of whatever branch you are in, and it just downloads the other version of that when you do a git checkout or a git when you change your branch and so on. So you should always just have one version of your file locally, and you will not have the issue that all the committed versions will take away the resources on your hard disk and take away, take a lot of time during the cloning. However, Git LFS is a separate executable, so it's a separate installer that you have to install, except if you're using some of the GUI clients like GitHub Desktop. They already have Git LFS integrated. So whatever client you use, check before or just make a check on the command line Git LFS. If you get an error, you probably don't have it installed. If you have it installed, you will see an output, a reasonable output on the command prompt. Then, apart from the client side, you actually do need to take care of your server side. So sometimes you do need to enable Git LFS on a repository basis, or you need to enable it on your system. But all the big players here, GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, Visual Studio Team, Foundation Server, they all support Git LFS. So it's just a matter of making sure that it's also enabled on the server side. One caveat that we have with Git LFS is currently it doesn't allow the SSH authentication. So you'd have to use a username and a token and the HTTPS protocol. That's something to keep in mind. Then down here, I have the links. You can read up on our blog again in detail about Git LFS, or obviously you can go to the official page where you will also find the downloads for installing Git LFS. However, well, not however, but I've talked about the preconditions, the requirements that you need to do both on the server and on the client side. But once that's done, then kind of Git LFS gets out of your way. So you do have some special Git LFS commands, but you wouldn't really need them on a daily basis. So once things are installed on the client and on the server side, then you can just do your standard git commit, git add, git push, and you can basically forget about Git LFS again, and Git will just handle things behind the scenes. So you can see here, I do have a Git LFS enabled repository here. I was just really doing git commit, git push, and then in the log I can see that yes, actually it does take care of Git LFS here. So setup may be a bit of a hassle, but once it's there, it gets completely out of your way. All right, so this leads us to the third issue that that we saw during our initial phase here of rolling out git-xitrail to various clients. And merge conflicts are definitely the most advanced topic that we are going to talk about in this webinar. So what are we talking about? So Git is basically pretty strong when you when you version, well, text files, when you deal with standard source files, then Git can actually most of the time do an automatic merge of your files. So you work on a file in some part and your colleague works on the same file on some other parts, and Git will happily manage this, apply its magic, and make sure that both of your changes are merged correctly, and there's usually not much to do for you at this point. Only when you really manipulate the very same line of source code when it's, when it's very complicated and Git cannot figure out how to manage it, then you end up in a merge conflict. You still only really have to merge or to resolve that part in the source file where the actual conflict occurs. So you can still apply automatic merging for wherever you don't have any conflict, and then you go to the conflict that may be just one line in your source code, and you fix it and you commit it and you're done. Now, with Excel, it works a little bit different. And the reason for that is that Excel to Git is really a binary file. So Git is not able to merge parts of the Excel file or do anything at all. So which means that when it comes to a merge, whenever an Excel file is included, it always comes to a merge conflict. And that's kind of a bit an annoying part about how Git works with Excel, because nobody really is a fan of merge conflicts. And just to visualize this down here, we do have a picture of how things typically look that will cause a merge conflict to happen. So we have here AB, our master, on our remote, and then I am going to do some changes here based on basically the commit B here. So I commit my my version, and then in the meantime, while I'm doing actually my work, somebody else has either pushed to master, maybe directly, or otherwise maybe has merged a branch with an Excel file into master. Anyhow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to git push. I'm going to be told I have to pull first because origin master is ahead. So I'm going to pull, and in that moment, I'm guaranteed to actually end up with a merge conflict. And unlike with when we are working with the source files, I cannot just go into the files and then say, well, I would like to accept that, or I would just resolve this. What I have to do is really I have to decide for either my C commit here or my D commit there. So binary files, I need to just say which one wins over the other, and you can probably see that this kind of leaves us with the problem that, well, I'm either throwing away the changes from C or I'm throwing away the changes from D. So let's see how we can actually improve that situation, or how we can prevent that from happening. So one obvious and simple solution to that issue is to only ever have one person working on that file at the same time. And this is a workflow that we are kind of used to from other collaboration tools other than Git, like shared drives or SharePoint, where we are able to exclusively access that Excel workbook, lock it, and then prevent others from doing changes while we work on them. And so this strategy here is really to get around that situation where we end up in a merge conflict altogether. It's very, very simple. And the suggested solution down here, as you can see, is a simple team chat. So most of the teams nowadays, they are using either Slack or any of the other popular chat system. And it would, for smaller teams, for a simple situation, it's probably a very, very cheap and very effective way to just communicate on chat that you are using the spreadsheet so that the others wait with doing their changes. This will prevent you from running into merge conflicts. The other solution, a little bit more standardized solution to the file locking system, is to use, again, Git LFS. So in the previous section, we were just introducing Git LFS as a free Git extension that takes care of your heavy Excel files. So, preventing you from from blowing up your local store or local hard disk with a lot of Excel files. But Git LFS also has an early support for file locking included, at least since one of the latest versions here, starting with version 2.0. However, here you have to watch out because not all of the platforms that actually have support for Git LFS do support this file locking API. You're lucky if you use GitHub or VSTS. GitLab does not support the command line API. It has support though on the web UI. And as far as I know, Bitbucket does not support any of the file locking features from Git LFS. And before we see how the workflow actually works, how it's really done when we want to use Git LFS for file locking, there is just kind of as a summary what to remember when we do actually use file locking. So first of all, the user does actually have to remember that he has to lock the file before using it. Otherwise, well, we're going to end up in a coordination problem. And then second of all, it's also very, very crucial that the user, once he has acquired the lock, that he does a git pull before he starts to work on the file. If he forgets about the git pull before he starts to work on a file, we are no better off than if we forget about this whole file locking thing. So this file, or this slide here now looks at the workflow of how we can lock an Excel workbook by using Git LFS. And the user here, that's me on the left-hand side, and then I'm working with Jenny, my colleague, which is here shown on the right-hand side. So what I do is I go into my Git LFS repository, I say git LFS lock, and then the name of the file. And then Git LFS confirms that I have locked successfully my book 2 here in the screenshot. Then Jenny, at the same time, while I do some changes, she wants to do some changes too. So what she does is the same. She says git LFS lock book 2, but now she gets the message that the lock failed because the lock already exists. So what she can do now is she can say git LFS locks, and she will see that actually it's me who has who owns the lock. So she can probably then revert back again to the chat and ask me if I, intend to leave it locked for much longer, or if she can do her 5-minute change somewhere in between. So anyhow, once I'm done with my changes, I issue a git LFS unlock command here. It's unlocked again, and I can message Jenny that she can now acquire the lock. So this is how Git LFS locking works. I guess it depends a little bit on your personal circumstances. It may be easier to just use an informal locking through a chat. Maybe this one, the Git LFS locking, helps in your case. It depends a little bit maybe also on the platform you're using. So it's definitely worth to look into both of these approaches. All right, so we've just looked at 2 versions of the locking, and mostly this means that you are kind of working all on the same branch. So mostly you should be working on the master branch. You lock the file, and then you always commit to the master branch. However, this is really not very much the original design of Git. So we are going to look into how we can actually follow the standard Git workflow, the standard kind of feature branch workflow. So move away from only just using master and unlock the file, and really see how we can use that standard Git workflow, a multi-branch workflow, and how we can actually use our skills that we were looking at in the previous slides to really make that work also. So I'm going to actually explain how we can do that, or the workflow that is involved in such a multi-branch workflow based on the schematics down here. And I promise this is going to be the most advanced example here. After this topic, we're going to go back to the Git client tools, which is it's an easy subject. So this here really says that we start here on our origin master branch here on our remote, which is a commit A, and then I do git checkout -b, and then whatever the name of my feature branch is. So I'm moving here the blue commits down here. This is on my local branch, separate on a new separate feature branch, and I am going to do one commit and I'm going to do another commit. So I have two commits here on my feature branch. When I'm done with commit G, I'm actually happy. So I've done my changes, I'm happy, and I would like to merge it back into master. However, while I was busy doing my changes, my colleague actually was also not lazy, and he was actually already committing 3 new commits since when I branched off my local branch. So master now is at commit E, while my local branch is, my feature branch is at commit G. So what I'm now going to do is I'm actually going to diff my G commit here with my E commit here on the master. So I'm really just, as outlined here, I'm really just going to do a git diff master, and I'm going to see the differences between master and my branch. And the only thing then I have to do, there's really no way around it currently, I do need to merge or put together these 2 sets of changes manually into a new commit here on my branch into H. So I can see the differences between E and G, apply these differences to H, and then I'm ready to merge in H into my master branch. But again, I do absolutely need to make sure that I indicate which of the versions should win, if it is E or H. And this is being done by issuing a -x theirs into my merge command, always assuming that I'm executing it from the master branch. When I do that, I'm actually telling Git that I'm going to merge this branch and H is going to win. I do want that because I know H has been merged manually. It contains both the changes from master and from my branch. If I forget about git merge, if I forget about the -x command here, then Git will nevertheless give me a merge conflict, even though I obviously have resolved those manually on the content side. All right, so that's the schematics, and the next slide here is how this actually works in practice. So in a very simple example here, just we start off here on the top left. That is our commit on master. You can see we have 4 cells. All of them are have master 1 for the first commit in them. Then we branch off. This here on the right-hand side is my feature branch. What I do here is I do a separate commit. So I introduce, as you can see, I introduce an empty row. I do on top of that change the 2 cells on the right. So basically I change B1 and B2. I basically delete B2 and I change B1. That was what I did on my feature branch. And then my colleague here on the master branch, he was actually doing at the same time similar changes to what I did. So he was editing A1, he was deleting A1, he left B1 untouched, and he was deleting, he was editing B2. So we have changes on both sides. And now what I can do either on git-xitrail on the diff viewer, or maybe with using Spreadsheet Compare that we were looking at in the first part of this presentation, I can do a git diff master from my feature branch. And now I can see that, well, yes, I'm introducing a new row here, so that looks completely reasonable. And I know that basically I've only changed the right-hand side of the picture, well, the right-hand side of my cells. And this is obviously what I see here. So I can see, okay, I replaced master 1 by feature 2. That's fine, that's what I wanted. And then here I can see, well, I deleted something, but it looks like this is a conflict. So I then have to find out with my colleague if really it makes more sense to leave that value, or if my suggestion of deleting the cell altogether makes more sense. And the same actually on the left-hand side. So I left the left-hand side untouched, but since I do see the diff views here, well, I do see diffs marked in red and green, I can actually tell that here where it's green that the master has deleted something, and where it's red that actually we have an edit that I would override with my version of the file. And so this certainly works well if we have like smaller sets of changes. So it's probably going to be a big pain if you changed 50 sheets with 100 cells on each sheet. But if you narrow it down to like smaller commits, then it's very probable that maybe, you know, somebody changes something on one sheet and then somebody else changes something on another sheet. And then the diff viewer is actually going to give you the summary, which allows you to manually make sure that the changes from one branch are applied to the other branch. And then finally, when you did that, you are safe to merge back in your combined version of the different branches. All right, so that brings us to the last topic of this webinar. And I was promising it's a lot less complexity here in that last section compared to what we've just done. So it's kind of agreed upon that Git is not the easiest tool to learn. And especially for people who may be confronted with Git for the very first time, it may take them a little bit of effort to get used to the Git workflow, or if they are business users, you may have a hard time to convince people to use a command prompt. And to get around that, we have actually a lot of different possibilities in terms of Git UI clients. So we do have the command line, obviously, we saw that a couple of times during this webinar. Then we do have the desktop clients. We saw one of them, that was Atlassian source tree. Then we do actually have the possibilities to integrate things into the file system. We also do have the possibility to work with the web UIs from different Git systems. And last but not least, we ourselves are working on an Excel add-in that will kind of hide away the implementation details of Git, so that people or users who are just using the Excel add-in don't have to be really aware of how Git works under the hood. But let's have a look at all of these different options before we get to an end with the presentation and have a chance for Q&A. All right, so we looked at this. I mentioned it a couple of times. We have the command prompt. It is very powerful if you're used to work a lot with the command prompt. Then that's certainly a good tool to know. But a lot of people actually have some issues when they have to work down on the command prompt. So for these, the biggest players here on the Git space, they actually have some free tools to download. So we have GitHub Desktop, we have the source tree that we were using earlier, but there's many, many more. There's commercial ones, there's free ones, there's some, that are better at one thing than the other. So just go to the URL here. It's a complete overview directly on the web page from Git, where you can actually download the different tools, where you can see a description and you can try out different desktop clients. Then a little bit of a different desktop client is really Tortoise Git, which integrates into your native file system here on Windows. And you can see that you do have the overlay icons here. So it's similar to what you are used to from Dropbox. Let's say you can instantly tell if a file has been touched. If it's red, if it's green, you know, it's on the status of basically what you checked out. And then you can right click, you can make a click, you can do a right click on the file, and you will have here the different Git commands at your fingertips. So this is a client that also is easy to understand, easy to use, and directly integrates here on your file system. Then another possibility to actually use Git without even having to install anything on the client side, meaning on the user's computer itself, is the UIs from GitHub or GitLab. As I'm not aware of Bitbucket offering a similar solution, but if you go to GitHub and then there on basically the file overview page, you can just upload a file. And so you can just upload your Excel files and it'll overwrite the same Excel file with the same name, and you can commit from the web UI. And for GitLab, actually the same. So GitLab does it differently. So you do have to have it initially uploaded somewhere, but then once you have the file there, you can just go into the file. So it's not on the same view as it is on GitHub. You can go into the file, then you have a replace button, and again, you're presented with an upload dialog where you can upload your new version of the Excel file. So this is also one possibility how you can get around to having to install something on the client side. And then last, I was mentioning that we are currently doing some proof of concept work, some early stage work on an git-xitrail add-in. That's because a lot of the users that we've talked to have indicated that an Excel add-in would really be the most intuitive way for business users to actually deal with the whole issues. And the way that we have it designed is that you basically, that an administrator sets up, defines basically which repositories that a user is able to have access to. And then you just open your repositories directly from within the git-xitrail ribbon add-in. You can move down into the repositories folder. You can get eventually to the Excel files. And then you can, in the end, also choose which version of that or which branch of that file you would like to open. And as I said, it's early stage. It looks promising. It's the only thing you will require on the client side. So you only have to install an Excel add-in. You do not need to install even Git on the client side. And potentially in the future, we should be able to handle the locking feature automatically from here, so that merge conflicts, whatever we were looking at in the previous section, are kind of out of the picture and lead to a much better user experience, even if they don't have a lot of Git experience themselves. All right, so this was the overview over the 4 most seen issues that we have encountered on our way of talking to clients about git-xitrail. And I just have a few questions I see that people ask, so I'm really just gonna answer these questions, and then I'll just say a big thank you to you all for attending the call, for taking your time. So there's a couple of questions about the git-xitrail cloud that I was introducing in the middle of the presentation. And one of these questions is if git-xitrail cloud actually accepts private repositories. At this point in time, we don't. It's also got to do because we don't even have user accounts on the cloud version yet. But it's also got to do because we focus our development resources currently on the on-premise version, because most of our users who have private repositories, they basically have them on their side of the firewall. So they do not host their repositories in the cloud, which is why we concentrate on the on-premise version for the private repositories at this point in time. This may, however, change down the road. It's as I said, it's still early stage for the cloud version. We're still very happy if you try it out and let us know what you think about it. You can contact us anytime here on Twitter or on our email down here. So we're happy to chat. And then another question was also coming in about what git-xitrail actually tracks. And at the moment, git-xitrail really just tracks the formulas within a sheet and the VBA modules. So it doesn't track things like formatting. It does not yet track named ranges if they change. And it does not track if the value changes but the formula stays the same. These are all issues, or these are all features that we are looking at for the roadmap for the rest of this year. All right, so let me see. Actually, let me just give a minute if there's more questions. Okay, so there's another question, yes, that I missed. What versions of Excel does git-xitrail work with? So this is a very good question. It actually works with pretty much all different Excel workbooks. So it works with the old format, the XLS format. It works with the new ones. It works with all kind of different formats, whether it's XLSM or not. So I guess only the very, very early stages from like 19 something, you may run into a problem, but so far all of the different Excel versions really are supported by git-xitrail. Also, if you edit files on Mac, that also works. So Excel versions shouldn't be really an issue at all. Let me see if there's any other questions. Right, so another question is if we are going to support pull requests from within git-xitrail. And the answer is yes, but it's also down the line. It's currently not clear at which point exactly we're going to add it, but it's definitely on the roadmap. I would say it's something that we could probably be expecting in the second half of 2018. All right, I think I have answered all the questions. If there's anything else that you would like to know, just send us an email. You should be able to, as I said initially, you should be able to just hit reply on the reminder or on the invite, on the original invite, and we're happy to get back to you. Other than that, thanks a lot for your attention, and we will send around an email with the session, that is with the email, with the recording and the slides of the talk. So you can rewatch it and you can refer back to the slides. As I said initially, I will send it out after the talk, well, either today or latest early tomorrow. If there's anything else coming up in the meantime, just let me know. just send us an email and we're happy to get back to you. Thanks a lot for your attention and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.